Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here to talk about, I got a comment from somebody fairly recently, and the comment said something like, "Why do you still argue against period instrument performances? That ship has passed. They won. You lost. Give it up. Stop talking about it." That sort of thing. And I wanted to respond to that because I think it's important. It's a reasonable question, actually, and an important issue to talk about. Because, a lot of people run around saying, oh, Hurwitz hates period instruments. Well, that's not true. That's not true at all. I mean, if you look at my reviews, I often praise period instrument performances to the skies. I mean, there's innumerable examples of that. So I don't feel the least bit defensive about it. But I do have issues with the philosophy underlying those performances. It doesn't mean that you can't make great music with them. Of course you can. Lots of people do. It happens all the time. But, you can do great performances on the wrong basis. There's no hard and fast rule. We all need to keep on listening and take each performance as it comes. But the movement itself, in general, has certain, you might call theoretical or philosophical problems. And there are types of period instrument performances that I really, really don't like. And you shouldn't either, if you know what you're listening to. I know you can like whatever you want to like, but what I mean is understanding what we're getting, what's being sold. It's about being informed and educated about what the product is and what the representations are and how they're being made. And in order to illustrate that, I am going to bring back my favorite tools, my analogous tools here, analogous, how you pronounce that word, skillets, cookware, perfect way to get into this. I used to do rocks, sometimes junk food. There are all kinds of ways to make these points. But one of the things that I think is helpful in doing things this way is you realize that music is special. We love it. It's wonderful. But in some ways, it's not different from any other product or anything else that's part of our daily lives. And it has circumstances of the way it's been packaged and sold, which are quite similar to the way other things are packaged and sold. And in this case, I am talking about cast iron skillets. So bear with me. This is gonna work. It really is. Back in the day, there were two major manufacturers of cast iron skillets, Griswold and Wagner, actually, but this is classical, so we call it Wagner. And the type of skillet they made was this. Now, I don't collect cast iron skillets. Those old ones are still around, and some of them fetch exorbitant sums of money, which is crazy for a lump of cast iron. But lots of people spend a fortune on, shaded dog LPs and things like that in mint condition. They're collector's items. But this is the style. This is what it was. This is a beautiful pan made by Lancaster. There's the name down there. We'll turn it this way. There it is, Lancaster. And as you can see, it has a smooth cook surface and relatively thin walls. It's hand polished. And that was the hallmark of these older cast iron skillets. They had a smoother cooking surface. However, modern cast iron skillets look more like this. They are pre-seasoned, which is very useful. Because seasoning, it's where you bake oil onto it and all that stuff to try and, make sure it won't rust out on you. This is by Lodge, the iconic American manufacturer of cast iron cookware. It looks almost identical to the other one. It's just black because the seasoning has turned it that color. The playing surface, yes, it's a harp, banjo. No, the cook surface is a little bit rougher and more pebbly. And the reason for that is that this is made in a factory industrial process and not hand polished. It makes absolutely no difference in terms of cooking performance. Zero. In fact, this may hold the seasoning a little bit better because the surface is very gently, a little bit rougher. It's very gentle. Very small difference. It's also maybe a little bit thicker in terms of its overall weight, a little heavier, but it's a fabulous pan, as was the original. They do exactly the same things, almost identically in all respects. Now, this type of pan, let us assume we're talking about music, and you get this. This is a period instrument performance from Lancaster. It's virtually identical to a modern performance, except for this little smooth surface. Maybe that rougher surface on the Lodge is vibrato. It has more of it than the older pan does. But it's an exact replica of the older pan. Now, in music, of course, we can't do exact replicas. We can't, and we don't. And the period instrument movement does not. They do not play exact replicas of period instruments. They play better, modern, improved versions of those period instruments, because those period instruments had all kinds of mechanical and construction problems, and there was no consistency in how they were made. So, I mean, we'd be crazy not to resolve that, right? So right away, period instrument performances are operating under a somewhat false pretense. Even Mr. Lancaster here takes advantage of modern machine tooling in order to make the product and then finish it in a way that makes it virtually identical to the older versions of these pans. So yeah, you can try to do something that's as much of a replica as possible in terms of the earlier style, but that doesn't get you. That only gets you to the notes, to the performance. This is nothing about quality of interpretation, musical insight, or anything else. I mean, this pan it's made with great care and artistry. So yeah, I mean, they bring that to bear in the process, and the best period instrument performances do that too. They have a high level of artistry, and they understand what they're doing, and if they play it beautifully, I'm all for it. I love that pan, and I love a lot of period instrument performances. But the differences between that and the modern version, right here, the good old Lodge, they're very small. They're very small in all the ways that don't matter. In the ways that matter, the differences are interpretive. It has nothing to do with the basic construction of the instruments themselves. There are a lot of period instrument performances where the players assume that the instruments are going to do their work for them, and that because they use these period instruments, the performance has somehow an authenticity and a validity that exists independently of whether or not the performers have any feeling whatsoever for the music. And we would all agree that that's not true, that that's ridiculous, but it happens. It happens, and it doesn't happen, all that infrequently. There are a lot of performances that rely on that to carry them across, especially performances without conductors or performances where they just play metronomically. We have those issues, right? But you can do it. You can do a great period performance if you know what you're doing, as the Lancaster people do, and as the best period instrument players also do. So I'm fine with it. Mahler said once, Tradition ist Schlamperei. Tradition is slovenliness. But he meant that, of course, within the context of an accepted idiomatic performance practice of the classical repertoire. He wanted them freshly thought out. He wanted performances that presented the music as new and exciting and all of that. I mean, he did not expect to throw the baby out with the bathwater. But there are performances that do that on period instruments, and they really make sort of a mockery of the whole period instrument thing. And the skillet equivalent of that is this gizmo. Now, see this? This is very, very interesting. Actually, I love this thing. I think it's beautiful. And some of those performances are too, but they're not authentic. I mean, this is the Finex cast iron skillet, which is made in Portland, Oregon. And as you can see, it has the smooth surface of the authentic period pieces, but it's, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, octagonal. Thank you. Looks like a stop sign, right? It's octagonal. And it has this hoogie doodad in the handle, One of the beauties of cast iron cookware is that it's cast. It's all one piece. This is obviously had stuff added to the handle. It's not one piece. And this gizmo, allegedly, keeps your handle cool because cast iron cookware retains heat like there's no tomorrow, and those handles get hot. And you have to use silicone handle covers and things like that if you don't want to incinerate yourself when you pick it up. And you can use it in the oven, and it gets really, really hot. So we have this thing it works. It sort of works. It gets the job done. It does, or it cools things a little more quickly. But what you get is the traditional smooth surface. But the shape and this stuff, this is entirely modern. 100% modern. I'm not saying it's worse, but it's entirely modern. I mean, it's actually, I think it's kind of a work of art. It's a beautiful piece of, cookware manufacture. But is it authentic? Hell no! And there are a lot of period instrument performances that are like this. They are like this. They have an authentic, what they think is an authentic basis, the smooth surface. And then they attach all kinds of weird doodads and design features and structural variants and things like that. They think that using that one element, period instruments, smooth cooking surface, gives them license to do anything that they want with the music. And while it may give them license with a frying pan or a skillet, which actually, all it has to do is cook an egg, with a piece of music, we're in slightly different territory, aren't we? Because then you're dealing with questions of interpretation and structure and shape and ornament and all of these things. And that stuff, all of these decorative elements, if you want to call them that, away from the basic function of the thing, which is to, cook your egg, or, play, Bach or whatever you're playing. All of those other things are accretions, modern accretions to the basic period instrument fundament. And they use that period instrument fundament to justify the modern accretions. But there is no justification for it because you can't point to anything that may have been, happening in the period that gives you anything other than this. This is it. This is the basic authentic shape, and it's very, very, very similar to this, because the tradition, which Mahler said is slovenliness, there is a tradition that is valuable, and the tradition of modern performance of classical music, while unquestionably things have changed somewhat, instruments have improved and things changed, but it's a living tradition. Remember, we've talked about this before. The oldest orchestra to perform Beethoven symphonies regularly was the Paris Conservatory Orchestra, which was founded specifically for the purpose of performing Beethoven symphonies around 1827, 1828, 29, in that area by Francois Habeneck. And they recorded a Beethoven cycle under Karl Schuricht in the 1950s before they were disbanded. That's the living tradition of Beethoven performance, because the performers in that orchestra were trained by people who go all the way back to Beethoven himself. You think that that's crazy. It's not. It's not as much time as you think it is. One of the things that's so crazy is our short memory, our short time span, our short attention span, our lack of understanding. It's much easier to understand when you talk about soloists. Like, for example, Claudio Arrau. Claudio Arrau's teacher was a pupil of Liszt, and Liszt was touched by Beethoven. So you're only going back 3 generations, 4 generations, assuming these players live to be in their 70s or 80s or 90s, and they're training younger musicians who live to be in their 70s or 80s or 90s, then you get 3 or 4 generations. You've covered almost 200 years going back to Beethoven. So these schools of playing, these traditions are important. And the great orchestras, the modern orchestras, embody those traditions in 100 different ways, depending on which section you're talking about. The flutes have their school, the oboes have their school, the bassoons have their school, the clarinets, the violins, the cellos, the trumpets, the trombones, the Vienna Philharmonic with its famous Vienna F horns, things. These go back hundreds of years back to the time when these pieces were originally written. And these are the ensembles that they were written for. And they're being performed as part of an unbroken tradition of performance practice. So you cannot ignore that. You can't just say, oh, well, this has a little bumpier surface. It has vibrato in the string section. Therefore, it's inauthentic. No, what matters is, does it get the job done? Does it deliver the goods? And it does. So the fact is that both approaches can deliver the goods very, very, very well. They can. I mean, they both can. But when they do, when everything is in place and the music sounds fabulous and we love the performance, the differences between the authentic version and the modern version, those differences are relatively small and often trivial or insignificant, because what matters is the wider understanding of the music and how it should be played and how it should be interpreted and whether the performers are up to their jobs and they know what they're doing. And some of them masquerade behind this. And it's expensive. This pan, it's expensive. It's a beautiful pan, but they're not offering an intellectually, philosophically, or aesthetically legitimate simulacrum or copy, or they may be inspired by certain period elements, but what they're doing is wholly modern. And if they're selling it as some version of authenticity, then I get angry. I really do, because it's nonsense. And I mean, and as a consumer protection agent, which is what I feel I am, I really don't want, especially beginners, to be fooled by these people into drinking their Kool-Aid, by saying that, oh yeah, it's authentic and all that, when really what they're doing is a lot of just sort of vulgar, silly, not terribly intelligent, witless stuff that they may have read about somewhere in a treatise, and they've applied it to this piece of music without ever getting to the essence, the simplicity of what we're talking about, which is that the acceptable parameters of a great performance of any given piece in the modern repertoire are very well known and generally shared and agreed upon. So that's why I take umbrage at certain period instrument performances. It's when the players just, players do what players do. But when players do what players do, what they're doing it as modern players. They're not doing it in recreation of some sort of historical validity or superior form of legitimacy. They're just out there doing what players do, and it's either going to be smart or it's going to be stupid. And because period instruments have become such a thing, and there's such a dogmatic insistence on the rightness of the movement as a whole, you get a lot of charlatans, a lot of snake oil salesmen, a lot of not very bright interpreters and performances that really don't have anything to offer other than the fact that they're pretending to recreate the circumstances which, as Tovey said, never should have existed in the first place, because they're unmusical and anti-musical. So that's my ultimate position on the period instrument issue. And especially for beginners, I just want to encourage you to listen to both. Don't accept that one approach is right and the other is wrong. Listen and understand the virtues of each, the differences of each, the significance of those differences. Educate yourself through listening so that you can enjoy these pieces in the widest possible range of legitimate and enjoyable interpretive options. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.